Hi everyone, today I'm talking about the stock crash of Boeing, and I've not talked about Boeing on the channel since I last made a video about Boeing after their earnings, which was I think about 2 months ago, maybe a month ago. And on the earnings, or the video I did about their earnings, I was pretty much saying how bad these earnings were, and it wasn't being reflected in Boeing's stock price. And I actually had a bit of a go at Boeing stock, and a bit like, how is it managing to do this? And it is massively overvalued at these sort of prices. And I said on the video that potentially if the stock market does downturn, then we'll see the actual real value of Boeing after a big massive stock market discount. And it has hit Boeing massively because we have the CV outbreak, and it's really hurt Boeing, and we're starting to see it on Boeing stock right now, which is down I think 40% as of this week just gone, which is absolutely huge. So we are seeing a big massive discount on Boeing now, and I'm going to go through Boeing about some of the positives and negatives, and then I'll talk about the stock at the end and what I think about the stock and if I'm buying the stock. So positives first with Boeing. I'm not going to do too much of a deep dive in the company itself. I'm just going to talk about the changes since my last video about what's changed with Boeing. And the first of all is the discount of the stock. Now the stock is obviously at a 70% discount. Now that's quite a bit of a stock. We're talking about a stock since its all-time highs has gone down absolutely huge. It's a stock that has gone down over half of what its value was, and I think that there's been a lot of negatives with Boeing, but they are pretty much starting to buy take the stocks down to reasonable prices right now. And as I always say, guys, is you don't buy companies because of news that's going on right now. You buy companies what you think the future is going to be. And right now, a lot of the news that's going on is starting to get factored into Boeing. But what you've got to do with Boeing is you kind of got to go and look, as a long-term investor, you got to look 2 to 5 years down the line. Where do you see Boeing be? So we're starting to see a lot of what's been already happening starting to get priced into Boeing at last. Second of all, the dividend. The dividend is now approaching a near 6% yield, which is quite high for Boeing. It's been a while since I've seen Boeing this high. I don't think I've actually seen it this high before. I think I remember at a point it being in like the 4% range, but yeah, 6% is quite a high dividend. And I know there's going to be questions about how much they're going to raise this dividend, or how is this dividend at threat. And I think right now the dividend's probably safe for another year. Then we'll talk about if they're going to potentially look at cutting the dividend, but I think at the moment the dividend does look quite safe, and even if it stays the same, a 6% dividend yield is a pretty good dividend yield really overall, especially when you're getting it on a discounted stock that probably over the course of a 2 to 5 year span you might get that share price increase as well. So the dividend is quite attractive, and like I say, I think overall it's probably going to be a safe dividend. Certainly long term I see them returning to increasing that dividend share price. Number 3 is about the recovery of Boeing. Now, I think when we look at Boeing, I think we can all agree that Boeing is probably going to recover. I certainly don't see Boeing ever going bust. I think that they've got a massive moat. How hard is it for a company to come into this sector to make airplanes and get everything, the plans, the production, all the certificates for all the planes? It's very hard to do. So I think they do have quite a big moat. They obviously cover it with military and passenger planes. And when we look at it, there's only really Boeing and Airbus out there. So it's good. Air travel going forward, after the coronavirus goes by, air travel is going to resume as normal. People are going to need planes. People are still going to fly. You can't tell me in 2 to 5 years people are going to stop flying. It's not going to happen. It's going to carry on. It will recover. So when we look at Boeing, it is going to recover from right here. It is probably at one of the worst points right now, but long term, what's the future of flying? Where do we see Boeing? Do we see Boeing bust? No, it's going to be still around here because planes are still going to be needed. Next point is the order backlog. Now, obviously, that has been started to get damaged slightly, and there has been a lot of net losses in orders, but it's still a very, very large back order. And when we look at the back order, they're not going to run out of planes anytime soon. What's going to happen more than likely is that, sure, the backlog will start shrinking a little bit, but when it starts recovering, when the reputation comes back, when the airplane companies that need the planes start recovering, they'll start adding back into this back order, because they know that at the moment they're going to be jumping quite closer to production than what they would have done normally. Normally when they put this order in, they'll be waiting on 3 to 4 years. Now at the moment, they can they get it down to 2 years waiting. So some plane companies will at some point be eager to jump in and take advantage of that smaller order list or order backlog that Boeing have. And the next thing is the US protection that they put over Boeing and also the banks. Now obviously the US government wants to look after Boeing. It's one of their own companies, especially with Trump in charge. He wants to make sure Boeing is still around. You know, he's massive on American manufacturers. We've seen it with the car industry. It's same with Boeing. He doesn't want Airbus taking all the orders, so he's done it before. He's made sure he's made life difficult for Airbus and a lot easier for Boeing. So if worse comes to worse, the US will protect its own aeroplane company, because it is massive for the economy itself, for jobs, for the growth. So the US is backing Boeing. They will never see them, struggle, or they'll try help them when they are struggling. And also the banks themselves. The banks are, even when Boeing get into this trouble, we've seen it before. How much money did Boeing need to lend from banks? And look how easy it was. They're all queuing up to lend them money because they know that Boeing will be able to pay them back in the long term. And also, they're not going to see Boeing go bust, because they've also got a lot of money tied up in them in other loans. And if they go bust, they'll never get that money back. So other banks are going to be protecting them as well, so that's also a good thing with Boeing stock right now. And the last point is the MAX 8. Now, I've been very critical of the MAX 8, of course, because it has been responsible for 2 crashes. But when we look at the MAX 8 now, it's probably only a couple of months off coming back. Most of the problems are going to get solved. It's probably now a more of a closer point of returning. We're probably looking at the MAX 8, and it's probably, I would say, about 3 to 4 months away from returning now. A lot more of a realistic time. So the MAX 8 is a lot closer to return, and when that MAX 8 comes back, it's going to solve quite a few headaches that Boeing has going on right now. So the MAX 8 isn't too far away, in my opinion, now from return. I think that a lot of, obviously, the previous suggestions from Boeing were absolutely, stupid. Like they were never going to bring the MAX 8 back, a month after these problems were found, like they were saying previously. But we're starting to get to a realistic time frame now, the MAX 8, which will solve so many problems for Boeing. So some of the negatives is the EPS, and obviously the EPS is going to get hurt. It's going to get hurt this year. It's probably been negative EPS, really, when we think about it, which also will affect the dividend, like we said previously. Obviously, when we look at 2 to 5 years, where do we see the EPS? We'll probably see it recovering, especially when that MAX 8 returns, which I definitely see it returning this year. So one of the negatives is the EPS, but overall, like I say, I think this is a short-term thing. 2 to 5 years, I see this recovering. And the next point is the balance sheet, which obviously is not as good as what it once was. It's still not bad, but at the same time, when we look at the balance sheet, it has just suddenly had 13 billion worth of debt put on it from the loan to cover everything going on with the MAX 8 and the dividend. So the balance sheet obviously isn't as good as what it was. That's probably one of the negatives. That's probably the second biggest negative that I do have on this company right now. But, long term, it will slowly gain its feet again and make decent profit, and then it'll probably be able to sort its balance sheet out a little bit going forward. Number 3 is the reputation of Boeing. Obviously, with what's gone on with the MAX 8, the reputation for Boeing is not what it was a year ago, a year and a half ago for sure. The reputation has been hurt on Boeing, but unfortunately for everyone else is when you look at who is out there to order planes from. Airbus, is everyone going to go to Airbus, or are they going to come back to Boeing? They're going to be sticking with Boeing. So even though the reputation is hurt, lucky enough for Boeing, because of the moat they have, there's not much choice for a lot of aeroplane companies where they go for their orders of the planes, because there's only 2 major players out there. So even though the reputation is hurt, it does look like Boeing will be fine, because a lot of these airplane companies do have no choice of who to go to. And the last point is probably the biggest one, is the future orders. Now, obviously, a lot of these airplane companies are struggling right now because of what's going on with the coronavirus. People not traveling, that'll hurt them. If they've got not got any money, they're going to have to take debt on. Are they going to go buy new planes? This is more of the longer term one, and how long this could affect Boeing. Obviously, Boeing should be quite safe because they've got the backlog of orders. It's just how many orders are going to get cancelled and how many are going to get added on. Because of the backlog, it makes it a little bit safer. At the same time, it will hurt. This is the biggest thing that's going to hurt them now, is not because of anything that's happened here with the MAX 8, the negative EPS, the balance sheet. It's the future order side of it, because it's going to be interesting to see how a lot of these aeroplane companies recover, and when they recover, are they able to go buy the planes? It's all down to them, really. It's a bit out of Boeing's hands about the what's going to happen with a lot of these orders right now. Now I've got to say, this is the thing with Boeing that I do really like, is that when I look at a lot of these airplane companies that are discounted, they do have quite small dividends. They don't offer much stock price increase as well, which is one of the big things that has really put me off not getting into any of these airline stocks that are out there right now. We hear a lot of other YouTubers in the stock market talking about getting into some of these airline stocks, but for me, I look at them and I just don't see that much of a stock market return, and I don't see much of a dividend either. And I look at Boeing and I think these kind of have a bit of a really strong moat. There's only two competitors out there. It's kind of in that airline industry, and you get a strong dividend. So, am I going to go buy Boeing stock? Obviously I was a massive hater on the company only a month ago, but at last we've seen a big massive discount in the company, which does make it really attractive, especially with the dividend that we have and the moat that Boeing has right now. So I'm going to shock a few of you guys and actually say that I actually already have bought some shares in Boeing, and I didn't make it as the title of the video. I just wanted to leave it to the end of the video, but yeah, I did buy some shares in Boeing, and some of you guys might be a little bit shocked, especially if you watched the video that I did last on Boeing, but I bought in actually at $160, and I bought on Thursday I'm making this video right now, and I'm quite happy with that because I've got the stock at pretty much half its value, and like I say, when I look, it's a massive discount with a dividend, and I see the stock price in 2 to 5 years, I see it recovering, especially 2 years down the line. I expect it to be back at $300, and then when we look at 5 years, where do I see Boeing being? I probably see it being, I always said that I feel like before the whole Max 8 crisis, if we pretended the Max 8 crisis did not happen, where would Boeing be at the end of where we were at the bull market in February, March time? I reckon Boeing would have been a $400 stock. I reckon it could have even been a $500 stock. So realistically, if we say that Boeing was, let's go on the low estimate of a $400 stock, we're talking that Boeing has pretty much nearly got 200% upside from these prices to $400. So that's a massive upside, and like I say, if we can get to that sort of prices in let's say a 3-year time span, fantastic. So like I say, I think there's a massive upside in Boeing right now, especially at these sort of prices, and I'm willing to take that risk. I know there's a lot of risk because Boeing has the potential to go down from here, depending on what happens with the CV and the airlines and the orders, but for me, it's got prices that I'm willing to take that risk now. So I thought I'd update you with that and put that little surprise in at the end, and also talk about Boeing stock because I know a few guys wanted me to talk about it. So there you go. And as always, guys, I hope you enjoyed the video. As always, give it a like, subscribe if you haven't, and I'll see you in the next video.